I'm Dr. Joan McBee, the chair of the School of Business. Thank you, Susan, for putting on this event tonight. We have Robert MacLellan with us today. He is the founder of Pacific Coast Restaurants based in Portland. Mr. MacLellan is a graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Business Entrepreneurs Program and was the youngest VP of Marriott. He was the owner and partner of Wendy's in Southern Oregon. His Medford location had the highest volume in the first year of operation. Pretty impressive. And it later expanded to 5 other locations in the state. He also was a franchise operator of Blockbuster Video with stores in Oregon, California, and Alaska. He created and currently serves on 18 advisory boards in Washington and Oregon. I don't know how you find the time for all this.
And to come here.
Some of the boards he serves on is the Bear Creek Greenway Foundation, St. Mary's, the SOU Foundation, and our SOU School of Business. So welcome, Mr. MacLellan.
Thank you.
The stage is yours.
Thank you for having me. Make it perfect. 3 words. 3 words that anybody can understand. It's the mission statement of this particular company. The newest Guatemalan that came to America, wound up in Portland, working in this restaurant, when translated, understands what make it perfect sounds like. Diana, you want to translate make it perfect Spanish? See? Simple. Everybody understands it. These are the 8 brands that we developed in Portland, Oregon, partially because we were lazy, which means rather than take the first brand, which is Newport Bay, and expand it across the country, we decided we didn't want to go across the country. We'd come up with another brand. So eventually we came up with 8 separate brands. When we started the company, we had 3 strikes against us. The first one is restaurants have the highest failure rate of just about any business you can name. A lot of businesses are gone in 10 years. Restaurants are gone in 3 years. 95% have failed and they're no longer around. Now I want you to look at this graph. This company started doing a volume here of $250,000 a year with 1 restaurant. And every year we added another restaurant until you look on the far end of the graph, we're at 120 million. Fact, 120 million. This is what I call the restaurant graveyard. These are brands that were found in Portland that are no longer around. Here's another group, page 2, a total of 107 restaurants that I happened to pick to make my point, and they all failed. So notice this one right here, Piatti's, a very cool restaurant from Marin County, California, Italian. They opened up in the lobby of the Benson Hotel, a great hotel, still a terrific hotel. They ran it for 6 months, and it failed. And one of the folks that made the decision to open that restaurant, one of the executives says, you know what? We missed the design factor. This is the Northwest. So they shut it down, gutted it, reopened it with new design, and failed again. So it has the distinction of the only restaurant that I'm highlighting that failed twice in one year. Now, my question is, what did these people do that these people didn't do? Or we can reverse the question. What did these people not do that these owners, operators, leaders did do? So I'm going to start off, since this is accounting department, accounting students, accounting majors. Any accounting majors? Oh, that's interesting. How many business majors? Okay, you have to take some accounting. You have to understand it. But this is a profit and loss statement, which is the heartbeat of almost any business. And it's a format that's very powerful because it predicts and forecasts what should be done, which is called budget, and we see what the actual is, Then we see what the variance are in this line. Then prior year, and what the variance is from the prior year to this year. It's a heartbeat. And we look at it every month for the last month's performance to evaluate, did we do it or not? Are we making a profit or not? For a restaurant to come from out of state, there's barriers of entry. One is the minimum wage. What does that mean? What's the minimum wage in Oregon? Anybody?
$9.25.
What is it?
$9.25.
$9.25, correct. What do you think it is in Missouri? $2.31. Texas, $2.40. Yeah. So, Colorado. Why is that? Those other states incorporate what is known as a tip credit. Tip credit means that the government understands that certain professions like bellhops, doormen, cab drivers, bartenders, cocktailers, food servers earn tips. So they reason, why do we need a $9 an hour minimum wage if we know that these types of workers make good money with tips? So they have a low minimum wage. So if you're a company coming from Texas or Arizona or Kansas to Oregon, you better be prepared to spend 4 times as much on labor. And if you're not awake and you don't know that, chances are you're going to wind up in the graveyard. Here's some states that have a high minimum wage versus not high minimum wage. There are some comparisons. So that's a barrier to entry. In some restaurants, you'll have a host, cooks, dishwashers, that the tipped employees share their tips with those categories so that they make more than $2.40 an hour in some of these states. Even in the states that have high minimum wage, they tip and share their tips. This is what I call a demographic wedding cake, which means the bottom layer, Newport Bay, was our first brand. It appealed to blue collar, brown collar, low-end white collar, families, grandmas, and lots of high chairs. And moms know when they go into a restaurant whether it's kid-friendly or not. This was a very kid-friendly restaurant. And you could tell when there's 25 high chairs leaning against the wall when you walk in the door, this is probably a kid-friendly place. Stanford's moving up demographically, economically. Professionals, lawyers, professional accountants, engineers, Armani suits, Lexuses in the parking lot, upscale. The Portland Steak and Chop House became a downtown watering hole and place to have lunch for the mayor, his staff, county commissioners, the district attorney, city attorneys, and more of those types of professional people. The Portland City Grill finds itself on the 30th floor of the bank tower, the U.S. Bank Tower. It's 14,000 feet. It takes up the complete floor, which has an incredible view of the river, north and south, and Mount Hood. Special occasions, private dining, private parties, celebrations. And then Henry's was a one-time 14,000-foot restaurant bar that serves over 100 different types of beer. 90% are craft brews, 10% are national, like Pabst and Coors and so forth. So that was what I call the wedding cake, or the pyramid of the restaurants that we owned and operated. Total employment, 2,200 people. But wait, every June there was a graduation class of seniors numbering 400 that would depart and be replaced, and we backfill another 400 employees in their place. So we had close to 3,000 people in any given year. A lot of folks to manage. A lot of opportunities, new hires, new positions, In a given year, we'd hire that many hourly employees and that many managers. We consider the hostess the vice president of introductions, greetings to the company. The hostess is the lowest paid position in a restaurant. Minimum wage. Maybe sharing in tips, maybe not. Since we consider that person extremely valuable, we would start them at $15 an hour, plus they share in a tip pool. And that position would not turn over. They'd make a decent amount of money, plus their meals, and the longer they stay, the more customers they greet and know and begin to know their names. And that, again, separates us from the competition and the restaurants that go to the graveyard. Another thing that we would do that other competitors would not do is keep the sections that a server would deal with small, 4 to 5 tables. That's it. But we also had a policy where a waitress would serve a table, and as she walks to the kitchen, picks up some dirty dishes or glasses on another co-worker's table. And then on the way out from the kitchen, another server might see that there's another dirty dish here. In other words, it was a team effort throughout the dining room. Competition didn't do that. So we had a policy where employees would be constantly helping each other, becoming more efficient, serving the guest at a higher level, and especially at the noon hour when time is critically important. We have the one-up system. What does that mean? When the chef is finished creating the food, pushes it through the pass-through, and the expediter that looks at it to make sure it's perfect, as soon as he says it is perfect, yells out the word, "Runner!" And the first server within earshot that can hear that voice stops, turns around, goes back to the pass-through window, takes the food to the table that it belongs to. Which means that Susan could take the order, but when the order came up and Susan's in the dining room, Janine would pick up the food and take it to Susan's table. Maximum efficiency. No wasted minutes. The food is served when it's hot at its peak of perfection rather than have it sit there and lose the temperature. So all that adds up to more personalized service by the server that's in charge of that section that she's working on. Now this is a very complicated issue. I have a hard time explaining this every year. Hot food on a hot plate, cold food on a cold plate. I like to take a little example. Whenever I go to a restaurant today or then, I always touch the plate and see what the temperature is. If I get a hot entree placed on a plate that I feel is room temperature or cold, that tells me chapters about ownership and management. If I receive a salad that's chilled to perfection, placed on a plate that just came out of the dishwasher, that's hot, that tells me chapters about ownership and management, and they're heading to the graveyard. Because that shouldn't be. It's not necessary. It doesn't take much effort not to do it that way. So from now on, when you go to a restaurant, touch the plate. See if you can pass judgment or forecast the future. Possibly that restaurant will prevail, or it may wind up in the graveyard. Who knows? The solo diner. We've all been a solo diner. So I thought, maybe we could make an issue of the solo diner. But before doing so, let's count noses. And pretty soon I found out that we were serving 15 people a day came in by themselves. It's not much. 10 restaurants, that's 150. 20 restaurants, that's 300 solo diners a month. 300 a month. And we had more than 20 restaurants, so there was more than 300 a month. So we designed a program targeting the solo diner. And we typically put the solo diner on the side of the dining room at a small two-chair, call it a deuce, by themselves. And we'd ask about magazines, newspapers if they would like. We'd also see if they were from the neighborhood or passing through. If they were from the neighborhood, we would move on. If they were passing through, we would bring them newspapers, a copy of the Willamette Week, a copy of papers that would show events. If they needed directions to get out of town, we'd do that. We would actually ask them if we could help them with a fax. Fax was more popular at the time. So a person could come in as a solo diner, read the Wall Street Journal while they're eating their food, and have a fax come and go during their lunch hour. This was somewhat invisible because restaurant management, even to this day, is dominated by men. And men that are competitors that are going to go look at another restaurant travel in 2s or 3s. They don't travel solo. So this is almost an invisible program to the competition. Yet, more and more solo diners became regular customers. It actually got to the point where Time magazine would come out, and a crowd of Time magazine devotees would show up to have lunch or dinner to read their favorite magazine. Again, these cost little, and they earn a great deal in benefits and dividends from our customer base. They appreciate it. And no other competitor does this. They just don't do it. First drink and the 3-minute rule. What this means is that we put together a thought process trying to manage time of the guests so that when a guest couple or foursome would sit down, if we could arrive at the table and take a drink order within the first 3 minutes, then there's a high probability that they would go through that drink while they ordered and while they're waiting for their food to come and order another drink. How much does a drink cost? Anybody?
Depends on what you're drinking.
How much?
Depends on what you're drinking.
$8.
Could be a lot. Could be closer to $8.
$8. So 2 extra drinks at $8 times 365 days times thousands and thousands of customers, you get the idea. So the competitors, the graveyard people, would show up at the table 5, 6, 8 minutes, maybe, and lose that opportunity and maybe not even think of a drink, or if they did, by the time the drink came, it's pretty close to the food coming, and they get 1 drink order. It's about numbers, and that really adds up. Super prompt seating. We used to go around the country every year, New Orleans, Dallas, Chicago, LA, and we would go to high production, high volume, casual dining restaurants and see what the magic is. One time in New Orleans, we were in line, waiting, 75 degrees, 6:30 at night, really nice, and as the line is moving quite quickly to the front, I got into the doorway and I could see the dining room, and I noticed something really interesting. And what I noticed was that there were 4 people at this table, and they were finished. The gentleman signed the credit card. They started to stand up, and they started to walk to the door to leave. Halfway between that table and the door, I noticed not 1, but 4 people hit that table, cleaned it up, put new plates, silverware, and the rest on the table ready to serve. And by the time the foursome that was leaving got to the door, management was seating through the hostess another 4 people. So they collapsed the slow point to almost 0. Compare that to restaurants we've all been to, where you see 2, 3, 4, 5 dirty tables, and we're waiting in line looking at our watch. Again, it's time management, it's being efficient, proficient, and again, managing that time management on the seating piece allows you to seat more people in the night, in the afternoon, serve more dinners in the same place, same amount of tables, just by being cognizant of collapsing that slow point. The second line says it all. This is our philosophy. The answer is yes. What's the question? The customer should be able to get whatever the customer wants. And by doing that, we separate ourselves from the competition. Because oftentimes the competition doesn't want to do what the guest would like them to do. Ticket time goals, 8 minutes at lunch, 10, 12 minutes at dinner. That's pretty quick. And people would learn that they could put in an order and within 8 minutes have their food at lunchtime. At dinner, it's a little slower because it's more of an experience. Splits. We have an elderly couple that would like to have a prime rib dinner on Sunday afternoon, but the amount of protein, amount of meat is a little too much. So they ask the server, almost cowering, fearful of what the answer might be, if they could please cut that protein in half, cut the meat in half. And sometimes they say, we don't do that. We love them to say that. Sometimes they'll say, all right, and they'll bring out an empty plate and a knife and a full plate, and then ask the guest to cut the meat up. What did we do? We cut the meat in half in the kitchen, a full measure of starch on each plate, a full measure of vegetables on each plate for the price of one dinner. Did we make those people happy? Yes. Did we set them up for abject failure when they went to the competition? You bet. Will they be coming back to where it's comfortable? Absolutely. So you just add that one more piece to all these things that I'm helping to define why we didn't fall into the graveyard and other restaurants probably did. The bottom line is really interesting. Our attitude was if we had the food products in the refrigerator, in the freezer, on the shelves of dry goods, and we can make a meal to your specs, I don't care what your specs are. If we have the product in the building, we will make your meal the way you want it with a smile. And I underline with a smile because we know our competition won't do that. And we love that. So again, we set our guests up for abject failure when they go to the competition. That's one more edge that we would have. So if you start thinking about all these and keep stacking them up, it's no wonder why we weren't as successful as we were. I stole this idea from a company in Carolina, a 100 Club. So if a server, cocktailer, bartender, host can demonstrate that they know the names of 100 guests, and they don't have to have an editorial, just, this guy drives a 55 red Chevy, his name is Jack, next. There's an executive, wears a tie, works for IBM, next. That kind of thing. A name and a little definition, times 100, you get a $100 bill. Well, who would have dreamed that when we put this program together, that eventually, with the crew, we discovered there's a 200 Club, and a 300 Club, and a 400 Club, and a 500 Club. One manager memorized the names of 1,000 guests. Do you think they did any business in that restaurant? You bet they did. One of the sweetest things is to hear your own name and how proud you feel when you walk in and they call you by your name and you've got guests with you. So that's one more thing we did that cost zero, that set the gap between us and our competition. Promptness. Especially at lunchtime, it's part of the product. We have to get back to work. So the restaurant personnel cannot poke around. They have to have a sense of urgency. And we know that. And you've all experienced the opposite. Checklists. In 1939-40, in Cincinnati, there was a contest between manufacturers of bombers that were going to be evaluated by the Army, and some manufacturer was going to be given a contract. Lockheed, Boeing, etc. The Boeing 4-engine had it made, and everybody knew they were the favorite. The plane took off, lurched, crashed, killed everybody on board, and that day was the birth of the checklist. Prior to that, they didn't think they needed it. But when you have 4 engines and 4 separate sets of controls for each engine, it overpowered the memory of the pilot, and he just has to touch the wrong one the wrong way, and they lost the airplane. 2 of us were pilots, 2 of us really understood checklists, so we have a checklist in the daytime and a checklist at night. A lot of the things on the checklist has to do with temperatures, which governs bacteria growth, which can make people sick. So we use checklists every day, twice a day. The manager goes down the list. There's probably 25, 30 items on each checklist, and they're different at night than they are in the daytime. But that's what checklists had to do. Deferred maintenance, as it says, was not an option. Everything was painted, fixed, no squeaks, no chips. Everything was constantly maintained. And when you have a functioning, complicated operation like a restaurant, the crew appreciates it, and we just get more done, and we're not slowed down by failures caused by lack of maintenance. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission loved us because we were very tough on drunks. From the Mississippi east, I'd say Chicago east, it's not unusual for businessmen, not that many women, to go to lunch and have not 1, but 2 double martinis, some cases 3. We, as a rule, served no doubles ever. We alienated a few of our Eastern guests, and some of them would never come back, but we kept drunks to a minimum. Our servers, bartenders, hosts, and cocktailers were overtrained to spot a drunk before almost anyone could, and then we would alert the bartender. If we had to cut that person off, we did so. Sometimes it was belligerent, sometimes it was argumentative, but we did not care. We cared about a guest getting drunk and hurting himself, another person in a car wreck. And we've had a few of those. So we went the extra mile dealing with alcohol and its effects. The county health department thought so much of us that one of our little 1950s diner restaurants in Lloyd Center it wouldn't be unusual to find a Multnomah County health inspector training in our restaurant. That's how clean it was and how much respect they had for us. And the biggest thing that health departments and health inspectors care about, again, is temperatures. Bacteria control, controlling the growth of bacteria. Because if a bacteria level reaches a certain level, 2 days after you eat, you'll have a tummy ache. Or, if the infection agent is strong enough, death. So the health department, that's what they're trying to do, is protect society from that eventual happening. So they actually used our restaurant for their own training facilities. Another one, an invisible one. If a customer asks of an employee where the bathroom is, do you realize what that tells us? They've never been there before. So we have an opportunity with a brand new guest that's never been here before to make a good impression. So we never say, the bathroom's over there. We say, you need the bathroom? Follow me. And we take them to where the door is 5 feet away. They appreciate that. It's a good feeling. Now they know where the bathroom is. Bathrooms. Bathrooms. Here's another simple one. We check and stock every bathroom every 15 minutes, which means the farthest, the longest a bathroom can get out of control is 14 minutes. So they're immaculate. But we also know, any marketing majors? Marketing. What's the product? Who's the customer? Who's the customer? Half the people that use the restroom are women. Men, stay out of this. women will make a brand decision in the bathroom never to come back to that restroom again. Never. Because they make the synapse that if the bathroom's a mess, what's the kitchen like? Now guys, for some reason, we grow up and we have a different value when it comes to bathrooms. This may be an example, I don't know. Here's another simple one. We answer the phone on 3 rings. If somebody doesn't answer the phone in 3 rings, they're probably going to be in trouble. And we think that the person on the other end of the line is calling us because they want to give us or spend some money with us. Answer the telephone. So 20, 25 years ago, everybody answered the phone. 20 years ago, voicemail came into being. 10 years ago, almost everybody's using voicemail. You can't talk to a human. Today, there's a couple companies that use this as a competitive edge to have this incredible, unknown, secret process called answer the phone. And when that happens, you have an opportunity to ask the person on the other end of the phone, does this happen to be a special occasion? Well, yes, it is. What kind of an occasion is it? Here we go. It could be a birthday, a celebration, a graduation. And now we can upgrade the experience by doing something extra special that that particular celebration deserves. Some of the stuff is very complicated, as you can see. There's a lot of businesses that, let me reverse it. There's not very many businesses left that answer the phone with a person to a person. And the landscaping in the parking lot, we used to take our landscaper to the country club and say, this is the standard. Fall below the standard, we replace you. And we would, and we have. And we believe, because we believe that the experience begins in the farthest corner of the parking lot as they walk to the door. And the parking lots are resurfaced as needed, not annually. Striped as needed, not annually, and all the shrubs, flowers, and trees are at the country club standard. This goes back to your profit and loss statement. You can count pennies because they build into dollars. We served 19 million guests' experiences a year in Portland. 10 cents times 19 million transactions, do the math. 10 cents. Now try $1. So we look at the operations with the eye of pennies. Don't waste them, count them. I started out working for Taco Bell, and today they still sell an 89 and 99 cent item. If you drop lettuce and cheese on the floor, there goes your profit. So I was trained under harsh conditions to learn about pennies, seconds, and ounces. Interviewing. We believe that the interviewer should spend 5% of the hour or 5 minutes out of an hour doing the talking, and the interviewee 95% of the time responding, so that you can evaluate the intelligence, communicative skills, attitude by listening to the responses of questions that cannot be answered by yes or no. What does that mean? How you doing today? Fine. Versus, what made you decide to come to this company to interview for a job? Now what happens? They have to think, then they have to speak. And you get a chance to evaluate. And sometimes in an interview, not unusual, for an applicant to answer a question that nobody asked. That's valuable intel for me because that person probably won't make it through the interview. If they can't answer the question I'm asking and they're answering a question that nobody asked, they're not thinking as clearly as I'd like them to think when the pressure's on at 12:30 at lunch hour. So we would oftentimes interview a management candidate and find out 5 would give thumbs up, but the 6th had discovered something that the other 5 hadn't. And once he revealed that, we move on to another candidate. So interviewing is one of the most important things you can do. I'm going to reverse the coin for a moment. Being devious, which you know that I'm not. If I'm coaching you to go in for an interview, then I'm going to ask you to see if you can dominate the interview. See if you can ask the employer a question or two or three or four and get that person that may hire you to do all the talking. If you can do that, psychologically that person, if he falls for this trap, will talk a lot and tell you a lot of things to impress you. Well, the hour is up, and the interviewer feels good about you, and you'll probably get hired, and you haven't said a word. I'm exaggerating to make my point. And some of the managers came from some of those places and beyond. 50% of our managers were women. 60% of our managers came from the ranks. Open a new restaurant, the trainers come in, and they could be there for weeks until their charges reach perfection. When P.F. Chang's opened in the Pearl, they brought in trainers, they hired a crew of 100. The day after their grand opening, the training crew got on a plane and headed back to Arizona. By comparison, we would still have trainers in our restaurants after an opening 4 to 5 weeks going for perfection. No slip. Well, we can't blame them. They just opened, and she's new. No. The graveyard restaurants talk like that, not us. And grooming standards are non-negotiable. Jewelry is minimalist. Here's another invisible component, competitive edge. Each new manager out of training class would be paired up with a veteran manager, and they meet face-to-face, then meet once face-to-face for 6 times in 6 months. The rest of their communication could be on the telephone or on the screen. And we would ramp a new person up twice as fast, as if there were no mentoring programs. Most of you won't know who Bob Farrell is, but he's my teacher. And listen to this simple lesson. He told me, if you go into business to make money, you might make money, and you might not. But if you go into business to please customers, really, really please customers, you cannot help but make money, because you'll stand out like a sore thumb, because that's not what the competition typically does. And that's his message. The pickle piece, one day a customer came into a Farrell's restaurant, and the server charged him a nickel for the pickle. And that guy said, I'm never coming back. This is an outrage. And he wrote a nasty letter to Mr. Farrell. And by chance, one day, Mr. Farrell was standing in line at United in Portland, PDX, and he bumped into the guy that was upset because he was charged a nickel for the pickle. And Mr. Farrell apologized, got him back as a customer, and from then on used that metaphor to drive home a point to give the customer what they want. This is, in sports, they call this a deep bench. Take a look at the top line where it says Henry's Tavern. The 9 means we have 9 managers and a combined total management experience of 90 years. And a new guy's going to open across the street and go against that team. They're going to have to do a heck of a job to do it. So we had a deep bench, which means tons of experience. And that experience was transferred onto the new employees, but that's a lot of depth. It also tells you it must be a pretty good place to work for those 9 managers to have a combined service of 80 years. We consider ourselves a learning organization, which means we all should be lifelong learners in our field and outside of our field. So we would go to different cities and study the top performing restaurants in Las Vegas, New Orleans, Atlanta, and see what the magic was. What were they doing so special to have a line out the door? There's always a reason. Can we capture that? Can we put it in a bottle and take it back to Portland? And oftentimes we could. We were in a restaurant in Atlanta, and there was a small sushi bar at the end of the regular bar, probably this long, and the manager says, see that sushi bar? We do $1 million a year out of that sushi bar that long. So when we opened the Portland City Grill, we hired a master sushi chef, and we had a sushi option, sushi menu, and we did $2 million in sushi. You travel around and see things. You bring ideas home, personally or professionally. Every one of our restaurants had a universe of 20 secret shoppers who were our guests, our customers. And we give them a comprehensive form that they had to fill out and not get caught. That's the word secret, we mean it. If they get caught by the crew, oh, you're a secret shopper. Hey, everybody, look at, he's a secret shopper. You're done for. You're out. Dr. Joe Cox, former president of SOU, former chancellor of the state of Oregon Education, was a secret shopper for 12 years, and he never got caught. Let me back up a second here. The bottom line, all of our managers receive a bonus, a cash bonus, every month if they hit the numbers. And if their secret shopper reports, of which they would have 8 per month, each store would have a universe of 20 secret shoppers. Let's say you're secret shoppers. You'd receive a letter in the mail. Here's your secret shopper form. And we would give you a free meal with you and your guest or your husband, wife, friend, whatever, in exchange for giving us this raw data. Katrina was the name of the manager. Billy Heartbeats was the name of the restaurant. She had her 8 secret shoppers each month, 12 months, 100% perfect score from every secret shopper she had. She was moved up. That was $1 million restaurant in annual sales. We moved her to a $2 million restaurant, and pretty soon she was running a $4 million restaurant before she was 25. She just knew how to take care of the guest. Guest complaints, we look at them as opportunities. There's an old story about a guy that walked into Nordstrom's in Anchorage with tires under his arms, and he was going to return the tires to Nordstrom's. Does Nordstrom's sell tires? I don't think so. What did Nordstrom's do about this? They took the tires back and gave him his money back. And 25 years later, I'm still repeating that story. Why did he bring the tires in? Well, as it turns out, the land upon which Nordstrom's was built used to have what they call a TBA, or a tire, battery, and accessories building that had about 6 bays, pull your car in, like a Les Schwab. And that man bought those tires on that part of the earth. And years later, returned like a lemming to Nordstrom's, not the building, but this is where I bought them. And they took those back and gave them money for it. Because, and Nordstrom's calls this phenomena heroics. Heroics. And a heroic is a chance to overcompensate with a guest or a customer or a client. You overcompensate with the guest the grievance that the guest has, so that when you're finished, the guest, the customer, the client sings your praise. So we did not allow the servers to handle complaints. The manager handles complaints, and the manager connects with the guest, because the manager has the ability to say, I'm sorry, didn't work. I'll buy a round of wine. They're still mad. I'll pay for your dinner, give you some wine, and give you a special dessert. Still they're mad. I'll kneel down and beg for forgiveness and give you a case of wine. Please. That's starting to overcompensate. It's starting to become a heroic, just like Nordstrom's. And that's what the manager can do. The server can't do that, but the manager can do that. And then the manager can go to the kitchen and find out why that steak was cold or overcooked and get it fixed. The graveyard restaurants don't do this. They don't behave that way. And by the way, if these restaurants are successful, what do you think the crew makes? Andrea, who is a cocktailer at the Portland City Grill, holds the record that I know of. And I know that I don't know the truth. But one night she made $1,000 in tips, plus her minimum wage. That tells me she was really taking care of a lot of guests at a high level. That's a lot of money. Comment cards, you know what they are, you've seen them, fill them out. What you don't know is the district manager reads it, marketing director, the vice president, and the president reads the comment cards. And they will guide you to success also. They'll tell you about a soup that's cold. Sometimes a guest will be sitting in this seat and it'll be a giant plant that was put there and he's just about fighting a jungle trying to eat. And nobody sees it. But if he writes on a comment card, we say, that's amazing. You go in a restaurant, sure enough, move the plant. Things like that. And our vendors that supplied us, we let the cooks vote democratically. And the guy that was working for Ocean Beauty, our seafood supplier, purveyor, he was an incredible performer, and he got the vote every year. This is when we put our stampers in the Portland airport. There's a jury that travels around the United States evaluating, and we got 4 best airport design, highest regard for customer service, best food, new food and beverage costs. So there's 3 accolades right there. Turnover is very low. McDonald's, to give you a benchmark, turns over everybody 300%. That means the whole crew out the door, replace it, out the door, replace it again. That's the turnover in McDonald's. 50% seems high, but it's not when you think that 400 or 500 graduates a year leave us with a bachelor's degree because they were working with us and for us during their student years. We'd have a suggestion mechanism where we'd look at your suggestions every 3 months, and the winner would get $1,000 because it's a grand idea. And if you could give an idea that would make money, make time, save times, or please a guest in a different way, you could earn $1,000. Diana, can you read this? That far back? How about you? Can you read this? Okay. This is a letter from the chairman of the board of Nordstrom's. This is to a landlord in California. This is telling that landlord that he, the chairman of Nordstrom's, would like a Stanford's restaurant next to every Nordstrom's in the country. Can you imagine this? The chairman of Nordstrom's? So I took this letter to Las Vegas to the shopping center convention and showed it to the landlord. He called his partner over. He says, I've never seen a letter like this before. And we had 6 other 900-pound gorilla dinner houses competing with us for this location in Walnut Creek. That letter did it. It's a letter to be proud of. And the hidden $20,000 means that we had $20,000 that would kind of invisibly float around the company so that if we ran into a woman or a man or a couple that had really abused their own credit cards and they were upside down and they were in a tailspin financially, we would say, stop, how much, and give them $10,000, pay them off, and tear the credit cards up. You obviously can't handle them. And then we would let the payback come out of their paychecks. And when that $10,000 got paid back, then it would float to somebody else. And sometimes a person or a family would get $5,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 because we get tangled up. We all do. And we would dig them out and have that money to do so. So that increases morale, commitment. And then Newport Bay customer card started slipping on all 7 restaurants. So we did 4 focus groups. They told us what was wrong. Things were tired and old. So we replaced and redesigned, opened a new restaurant with a fresh look, name, menu, oyster bar, sushi bar, and year 1 it did $4 million, so it was a success. So they helped us. Getting outside opinions really helped. Kindred spirits. If you go into Home Depot or Lowe's, you will have a difficult time finding a human being that works for the building, works for the company, but not Ace Hardware. They'll have somebody in the front of the store with a set of earphones, a speaker. You walk in and say, I need a 6-foot, 1-inch, 6-foot pipe, copper, 1-inch thick. On the headphones, they'll say aisle 17. Call aisle 17 and say, there's a gentleman coming down the aisle that wants a copper pipe. No waste of time. Call the customer quarterback. Kaizen, which means continuous improvements and innovations. And the master, the champion, is Lexus, Toyota. Finest car ever built. They receive 1 million suggestions a year from customers, dealers, and they make these tweaks every year constantly, and it gets better. Day after day, here's some more kindred spirits. People you can study, Cirque du Soleil. What do they do? That's so incredible. Zappos. How many know about Zappos? How many know that you can call Zappos for a pair of shoes that you have your heart set on, that they've advertised, and they're out? And before they hang up the phone, they'll say, wait, here's 2 competitors. I just called. They have the shoe. Call them now. You can get the shoe from a competitor. You will tell all your friends about that experience. Can anybody do it? A shoe is a shoe is a shoe. Of course they can. But Zappos did do it. Billion-dollar company. Mission statement, I'm closing with, make it perfect. Everybody can understand it. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? If you have any questions, I got a few minutes to do so. Anybody?
How did you start out? And what made you decide to go into the restaurant business?
I think it was a kind of a cerebral lapse. Because as I said, we started at the worst time in a recession. We were underfinanced with $10,000 between 4 people and going into the food business. Honestly, we came from the Marriott Corporation. And we had desires to be entrepreneurs. And we were highly trained by one of the best companies in the country, Marriott. They're very good. So that's how it started. We had a little burning desire to be our own captains of our own destiny, so we took a crack at it, and it worked. And we just kept our mind open. How can we get better, better, better? What can we do this week, next week to improve, like Toyota? Who else has a question? Yes, sir.
The first one was,
That's okay.
I'm from Portland, so I've been to almost all of your establishments. I think PCG is my favorite, but what's your favorite?
Henry's and PCG.
Love Henry's.
Yeah. Henry's is really cool. Questions? Yes, ma'am. Jane.
A couple things that bug me about restaurants. One is waiting to pay.
Oh, drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's like you're finally done, everything was fine, and then 15 minutes later you still haven't gotten the check. So how did you handle that? And also, another thing that drives me crazy are scripts, like chain restaurants. Are you finding everything okay? You know, the same thing every time, every server says the same thing. It drives me nuts. Like, how impersonal is that? So.
The first part of your question is, Jane was asking about waiting to pay. Well, we eliminated that because it drives us crazy. So as the meal is coming to an end, if there's not an opportunity for a dessert or something like that, or if it is, and another thing about desserts, we'd say, anybody want dessert? No, we don't want dessert. How about 1 dessert and 4 spoons? That's hard to turn down. Well, there's another sale. So our crew would be trained to spot that the dinner is coming to an end, start the process so that by the time you're finished, we've got you processed and you're out the door. That's especially important at lunchtime when time really counts. And the other part of your question? Scripts. We don't do that, didn't do that, won't do that. It's too affectatious. It's insincere, and it looks it and sounds it. Yes, sir. I remember you.
Since you said you started out underfinanced as an aspiring entrepreneur who doesn't have a lot of capital to start anything, what advice would you give someone that doesn't have a lot of capital to start, doing whatever venture that they may do?
Well, this valley happens to have evolved to being pretty special. That's part of the answer to that question. And John here, after we say goodbye, can talk to you about that because we have 3 or 4 startup mechanisms. We've got about 4 of them now in the valley that go annually, look for people that have a dream and help them articulate the dream and help them see if the dream makes sense profitability-wise. And there's funds available, right, John? There's funds available to help people like yourself. And another one is to go talk to an entrepreneur that's already doing it. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What was your biggest failure?
Well, the question was, what's our biggest failure?
You personally, your biggest
My personal failure?
failure. In the business.
Well, there used to be this gal named Dottie. I'm kidding. Biggest failure. We bought a franchise for Take and Bake Pizza for Eugene, and we were right in the middle of the University District, and all the pizzas we sold were this big, and all the ovens were this big, and we went upside down. We failed miserably. Who else?
I was interested to know with Pacific Coast, and then you look at a place like Jimmy Mac's in their market with their jazz music and the fact that they have service at their bar and fancy drinks or in Union Station. I mean, have you guys ever considered combining that type of atmosphere with one of your own establishments? And then kind of, and if so, like, is that something that...
The question is, do we combine musical programs, entertainment like Jimmy Mac's in our places? The only place we did that is the Portland City Grill. We had 4 piano players throughout the week, and the people liked the piano and sing with the piano player. And he had a good personality. He could really make people have a good time up there. But that was about it. In the Portland Steak and Chop House for Christmas, we'd bring in a trio. But that was about it. Because we were focusing on food production. We're food service managers. That Jimmy Mac's is one-off. You know, you can do it, but not 10 times. Last question. Yes, sir. Yes, doctor.
Well, Robert, that was great. I can see any of these tips you gave could work with any business. We can improve our dermatology practice, and so this was wonderful. But could you tell the group how you possibly could have the #1 Wendy's in the whole country?
Yes, I can. My 3 young partners, they were 24 years old, and when you have a Wendy's franchise, somebody's got to go back to Ohio and go through the management training program. When you do that, they teach you to deliver the food in 60 seconds from the time the food is ordered in the dining room or on the speaker in the parking lot. 60 seconds, that's the formula. My 24-year-old partner, Terry Farnham, reduced 60 seconds to 13. 13 seconds from the time you ordered in the parking lot or in the dining room. And that became a spectacle. People could drive from Ashland and Grants Pass to Medford and back because we collapsed all the slow points except when they eat. And they could translate all the slow points we saved into drive time. So we had a wider... So McDonald's across the street had a trade area like this. We had a trade area like that because we collapsed the slow points. And my 24-year-old partner taught me the concept. Collapse the slow points. And he did. 13 seconds. And it became the #1 Wendy's in the system around the world. In Medford. What does that mean? What does that really mean? The average Wendy's was doing $645,000 a year per store. Medford did $1.8 million. $1.8 million. Same building. And one grizzly, cold, rainy, dark November day, that yellow and red corporate ugly jet from Columbus, Ohio, came into Medford, Oregon with the president and founder, David Thomas, and Bob Barney, the president, to see for himself how in the world can a 2,600 square foot building produce $1.8 million in sales. In Medford, where? And he came to see, and we showed him. We pioneered 23 different operational changes in Medford, Oregon, that went nationwide. So that's how we did it. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.